It started with 3 checkout lines. Nothing important, nothing dramatic, just 3 lines at a supermarket on a Tuesday evening. The man stopped with his shopping cart and studied them carefully. Line 1, 7 people. Line 2, 5. Line 3, 4. Easy. He pushed his cart toward line 3. Then he noticed something. The woman at the front had an overflowing cart. Bad choice. He looked again. Line 2 had 5 people, but 3 of them were holding only baskets. Better. He changed lines. 2 minutes passed. Then line 3 suddenly moved. 1 customer. Gone. Another. Gone. The man looked over. He had made the wrong decision. Again, he felt irritation rise inside him. It was ridiculous. He knew that, but knowing something is ridiculous does not always stop you from feeling it. He checked his watch. 6:14 p.m. He wanted to be home by 6:30. Dinner at 7. Emails afterward. Perhaps an episode of something before bed. Tomorrow would begin early. There was always something waiting. Then the cashier in his line held up a product. No barcode. Of course. The man exhaled sharply. An employee was called. The line stopped. He looked toward line 1. Moving. Line 3. Moving. His line? Nothing. He grabbed his cart. Again. And moved. A few people glanced at him. He didn't care. Efficiency mattered. Time mattered. He joined line 3. For approximately 40 seconds, he felt victorious. Then an elderly customer at the register began counting coins. Slowly. 1 coin. Another. The man's jaw tightened. He checked his watch again. 6:17. 3 minutes. Gone. He looked around desperately for another option. That was when he noticed the old man. Thick mustache. Dark coat. Small basket. Friedrich Nietzsche stood at the end of the longest checkout line in the supermarket. 9 people. The man stared. There were clearly faster options. Yet Nietzsche seemed completely unconcerned. He wasn't checking his watch. He wasn't counting carts. He wasn't estimating how quickly each cashier scanned products. He simply stood there, waiting. The young man couldn't understand it. Eventually, curiosity defeated impatience. He abandoned his line again and approached him. You know that line is much slower, right? Nietzsche looked toward the registers. Is it? Obviously. The young man pointed. That one has 4 people. This one has 9. Nietzsche nodded. Then you should probably choose that one. The young man almost walked away. But something about Nietzsche's calmness annoyed him. Then why aren't you? Nietzsche looked at his basket. Bread, coffee, apples, nothing else. I am not in a hurry. The young man laughed. Everyone is in a hurry. Nietzsche looked at him. That sounds exhausting. The answer irritated him more than it should have. It's about not wasting time. Nietzsche's expression changed, not dramatically, just enough to suggest that something interesting had finally been said. Wasting time. He repeated the phrase slowly. Yes. The young man checked his watch again. If I save 5 minutes here, that's 5 minutes I can use somewhere else. Nietzsche nodded. A reasonable argument. The young man smiled. Finally, then Nietzsche asked, "What will you do with them?" The smile disappeared. What? The 5 minutes. Nietzsche looked directly at him. You are working remarkably hard to save them. So I assume you have something extraordinary planned. The young man opened his mouth. Nothing came. He thought about it. He would get home, put the groceries away, check his phone, perhaps answer an email, maybe scroll through something while dinner cooked. Nothing extraordinary. Nietzsche looked toward the registers. Interesting. You know precisely how many minutes you want to save, but you have no idea what you're saving them for. The young man said nothing. The line moved forward. Nietzsche took one small step. No celebration. No relief. Just one step. Then he continued. How many times did you check your watch while standing here? The young man didn't answer. How many times did you compare your line with someone else's? Again, nothing. And how much of the time you were supposedly protecting? Nietzsche paused. Did you actually spend experiencing? The supermarket suddenly sounded different. Scanner beeps. Shopping carts. Quiet conversations. A child laughing near the bakery. Rain tapping against the enormous windows. He hadn't noticed any of it. He had spent the entire time physically standing in the supermarket while mentally trying to escape it. Nietzsche placed another apple into his basket. The young man looked confused. You're really going to stay in this line? Nietzsche smiled. Yes. Why? The philosopher glanced at the long queue ahead, then back at him. Because I came here by bread. He paused. Not to defeat strangers in a race they don't know they're running. The line moved again. One step, then another. The young man looked toward the shortest checkout, then at his watch, then toward Nietzsche. For the first time, he didn't immediately change lines. And somewhere between the bread aisle and the checkout counter, a much more uncomfortable question had begun forming. Perhaps he wasn't trying to save 5 minutes. Perhaps he had simply forgotten how to live through 5 minutes that could not be optimized. The line moved forward, slowly, painfully slowly. The young man remained beside Nietzsche. He still didn't understand why. Every instinct told him to look toward the other registers, to compare, to calculate, to move, and eventually, he did. Line 2 was already 3 customers ahead. He sighed. I knew it. Nietzsche turned toward him. Knew what? We chose the wrong line. Nietzsche looked around. Did we? Look. The young man pointed toward the neighboring checkout. They're moving faster. And we could already be almost finished. Nietzsche nodded. And then the question irritated him. Then I could go home. And then dinner. And then I have some emails to answer. And then the young man paused. I don't know. Nietzsche smiled faintly. Sleep? Probably. And tomorrow? Work. And afterward? The young man understood what Nietzsche was doing. You're making this sound ridiculous. No, Nietzsche replied. I am asking where all this saved time eventually goes. The young man fell silent. Ahead of them, an elderly woman struggled to lift a bag of groceries into her cart. The cashier stepped around the register and helped her. It took perhaps 20 seconds. The young man instinctively checked the other lines. Nietzsche noticed. 20 seconds. What? That woman cost you approximately 20 seconds. The young man looked embarrassed. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Nietzsche watched the elderly woman thank the cashier. Tell me, when did another person's humanity become an inconvenience to your schedule? The question stopped him. He looked at the woman again. This time, he actually saw her. She wasn't an obstacle. She wasn't the reason the line was moving slowly. She was simply an old woman carrying groceries home. Nietzsche continued, You have trained yourself to divide the world into 2 categories, things that accelerate you and things that delay you. The young man looked around. He thought about traffic, slow walkers, long elevators, loading screens, people taking too long to order coffee, someone standing on the wrong side of an escalator, a driver waiting half a second too long after the light turned green, tiny delays, tiny frustrations, tiny pieces of life he had spent wishing away. Nietzsche picked up the loaf of bread from his basket. You call these moments wasted. But wasted compared to what? The young man didn't answer. The philosopher continued. Suppose I gave you every minute you have spent waiting in lines, every minute spent in traffic, every delayed train, every slow restaurant, every elevator, every red light. He leaned slightly closer. Imagine I returned all of them to you tonight. Hours, days, perhaps. What would you do with them? The young man thought. Travel? Read? Spend time with family? Finally begin the project he had talked about for years? Those answers sounded beautiful, but he knew himself too well. He would probably fill those hours. More work, more messages, more errands, more scrolling, more things to finish. The realization was uncomfortable. Nietzsche nodded as though he could see the answer forming. Perhaps your problem is not that life gives you too little time. He paused. Perhaps you give too much of your time to things you don't truly value. The line moved. Another step. This time, the young man didn't check the neighboring registers. A child ahead of them was trying to place a chocolate bar onto the conveyor belt. It fell. He picked it up. It fell again. The child laughed. His mother laughed. The cashier laughed. And unexpectedly, the young man smiled. Nothing productive had happened. Nothing had been optimized. No time had been saved. Yet the moment somehow didn't feel wasted. Nietzsche noticed his expression. There. What? 3 seconds. The philosopher smiled. You didn't try to escape them. The young man looked toward the supermarket windows. Outside, rain continued falling beneath the streetlights. For the first time that evening, he wasn't mentally somewhere else. He was simply standing there. The scanners beeped. People talked. Carts rolled across the floor. Life was happening in all the places he had previously labeled as interruptions. The young man looked at Nietzsche. So what? Should I intentionally waste time? Nietzsche laughed. You still don't understand. He pointed toward the checkout lines. The lesson is not to choose the slowest line. It is not to worship slowness. Then what is it? Nietzsche looked at him. Stop treating every moment between important moments as though it doesn't belong to your life. Silence. That sentence changed something, because suddenly the young man understood. He had divided his existence into 2 categories, life and waiting for life. Work was life. Dinner was life. Vacations were life. Achievements were life. But traffic? Waiting. Queues? Waiting. Walking somewhere? Waiting. Cooking? Waiting. Elevators? Waiting. And if you added all those supposedly meaningless moments together, they weren't small at all. They were years. Nietzsche placed his bread onto the conveyor belt. Their turn had finally arrived. The young man looked toward the other registers. The line he had originally abandoned had finished several minutes earlier. Strangely, he didn't care, because for the first time, he wondered whether the people who had left before him had actually gained anything, or whether they had simply arrived at the next thing they would hurry through. Nietzsche placed the bread, coffee, and apples on the conveyor belt. The cashier scanned them slowly. Beep, beep, beep. The young man stood behind him. His own groceries waited inside the cart. For once, he didn't look at his watch. Nietzsche paid, then stepped aside. The young man moved forward. The cashier smiled. Long day? Normally, he would have answered without thinking. Very. Instead, he paused. Actually, he looked toward the rain outside. Not anymore. The cashier smiled and continued scanning. A few minutes later, he walked out of the supermarket carrying 2 bags. Nietzsche stood beneath the entrance canopy. Rain fell heavily beyond them. The young man checked his phone. 6:41 p.m. He laughed. Nietzsche looked at him. What? I want to be home by 6:30. A tragedy. Nietzsche replied. The young man laughed again. 11 minutes. Earlier that evening, 11 minutes would have felt stolen from him. Now he wondered who had supposedly stolen them. The elderly woman? The cashier? The child dropping his chocolate? Nietzsche? The supermarket? No. The 11 minutes had belonged to his life from the beginning. He had simply spent them wishing they belonged somewhere else. The rain softened. People rushed toward their cars, holding bags above their heads. The young man watched them. Then he asked, Do you really never hurry? Nietzsche smiled. Of course I hurry. When there is something worth hurrying toward. He looked at the young man. The problem is not speed. The problem is unconscious speed. Silence. You rush through breakfast to reach work. You rush through work to reach home. You rush through dinner to reach entertainment. You rush through the week to reach the weekend. You rush through months to reach vacation. You rush through years to reach some imagined future. Nietzsche paused, and then one day you discover that the thing you were rushing through was your life. The young man stopped smiling. Cars moved across the wet parking lot. Headlights reflected on the pavement. Nothing about the evening seemed extraordinary. And perhaps that was exactly the point. He had always imagined life as a collection of important moments. Promotions, vacations, birthdays, achievements, milestones. But most of existence wasn't made of milestones. It was made of Tuesdays, grocery stores, red lights, coffee cooling on desks, walking from one room to another, waiting for someone to arrive, standing beneath a supermarket canopy while rain fell outside. Ordinary moments, millions of them. Nietzsche stepped into the rain. The young man called after him, "Wait." Nietzsche turned. "Then what should I do with my time?" The philosopher looked almost amused. "You still want instructions?" The young man smiled. "I suppose I do." Nietzsche looked toward the road, then answered quietly, "Stop asking how to make every moment useful." He paused. "Some moments are allowed simply to be lived." Then he walked away. No umbrella, no hurry. The young man remained beneath the canopy. His phone vibrated. An email. He reached for it automatically, then stopped. The message would still exist in 10 minutes. The rain might not. So he placed the phone back into his pocket and watched. Water gathered along the pavement. A father carried his laughing daughter toward their car. An employee pushed a long row of shopping carts beneath the shelter. Someone ran to the rain and immediately regretted it. The young man smiled. Nothing important happened. And yet, for the first time in a very long time, he didn't need anything important to happen. The following week, he returned to the same supermarket. Again, 3 checkout lines. Again, one was clearly shorter. He looked at them and smiled. He didn't deliberately choose the longest. Nietzsche had never asked him to. He simply chose a line, then stayed there. No calculations, no comparisons, no silent competition with strangers. When the line stopped moving, he waited. When an elderly customer needed help, he waited. When a child couldn't decide which candy to buy, he waited. And something remarkable happened. He lost perhaps 4 minutes. But he didn't lose 4 minutes of his life, because this time he had actually been there for them. Perhaps that was what he had misunderstood all along. Time cannot truly be saved. You cannot place 5 minutes in a bank and withdraw them 20 years later. Every second you save still has to be lived somewhere, and every second you rush through is gone just the same. The question was never, how much time can I save? The question was, how much of the time I have am I actually present for? And somewhere in an ordinary supermarket, standing in an ordinary checkout line, a man who had spent years trying to save his life 5 minutes at a time finally stopped trying to escape it.